It is the 4th of January 1990, and near the village of Harts Hill, a body has been discovered along the track of the West Coast Main Line. No one saw what caused the fatal event, but judging from the injuries they had received, it looks like they weren't hit by a train, more likely to have fallen from one. Not much more is thought about the incident. Sadly, it was not the rarest occurrence, as back then, train doors were manually operated. Thus, passengers accidentally opening or deliberately opening doors during the train in motion was not unknown of. But 8 months later, 2 more bodies would show up down the line near Tamworth. Then, another 2 more over the following months. Something bizarre was occurring. Each body was found over a shortish piece of track all around the town of Tamworth in the UK. This was very much out of the occasional passenger incident. Thus, a modern day mystery had begun to be etched into the closing years of British Railways, creating a Bermuda Triangle right in the West Midlands of England. Today we're looking into the Tamworth Triangle mystery. My name is John and welcome to Plainly Difficult. This video wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for my YouTube, Patreon and Ko-fi members. If you want early access to the channel's videos, as well as helping out financially for the channel, you can from just £1 per month. And as always, the links will be in the pinned comment below. Background. So British trains of the late 1980s and early 1990s were a whole different beast compared to the rolling stock of today. Design and operation harked back to a much earlier time. These were the British Rail Mark I and Mark II family of rolling stocks, body-on-frame carriages with manually opened swing doors and varying internal sized accommodation for the then class tickets offered. From a cursory glance, the rolling stock looked much more akin to something from the last century. Personally, I loved these trains in my teenage years, as you could lean out the windows, pull the cord for emergencies, hop out before the train stopped, and just the generally ancient smelling upholstery. This was back when Connect South Eastern was plying trains through Bromley South. They had a charm that the modern Electrostars and City Beams just don't have. The only exception is that the networkers have some charm, but they are in a very sorry state nowadays and are very grubby. I'm kind of going a bit off topic here, sorry. So for today, we're mainly looking at the British Rail Mark II and Mark III rolling stocks. They were an evolution rather than revolution of rolling stock design, bringing along the lessons learnt from accidents and maintenance problems involving the Mark I coaching stock, including but not limited to rust problems and crash performance, thus aiming to make a more efficient and safe foundation for a multitude of trains, from commuter services to intercity journeys. In the period of development of the Mark IIs, i.e. the late 1950s and early 1960s, the method of alighting and boarding the trains was still very primitive. Basically, it was just manually opened and closed doors. Many trains, both Mark I and Mark II derived, would be given the nickname slam doors, because, well, due to the slam they made when shut. Power-operated doors did exist at the time, just in case you're wondering, most notably on the London Underground, but let's not dive into why BR stuck with the slam door stock. People falling from manually opened doors had always been a concern. To try and mitigate this, some stocks had their door handles on the outside of the body only, meaning you had to open a window to reach outside to open the door, thus eliminating the risk of accidental opening from the inside, say from overcrowding or bags getting caught on the handle and the like. But there was little else to prevent doors opening. You could even open the door whilst the train was still in motion, which was common as trains approached the big London terminal stations, where passengers would jump off the train as it approached the buffer stops in order to get to their connecting tube or bus that vital half a second before anyone else. So the door's locking mechanism worked like this. The lock had these main parts: a bolt and its spring, a ram, a prop and its spring, and a toothed pinion. So the bolt interacts with the pinion via teeth on the underside of it, and the pinion is where the door's handle is mounted. Turning it turns the pinion and thus retracts the bolt. Once the bolt is retracted enough, is held back by the prop via a notch in the bolt. This is known as lock latched. There is a striking plate with a sloped edge mounted to the door frame. This is what the bolt contacts as the door is shut. When closing, the ramp on the striker pushes both the bolt and the ram back into the lock. This disengages the prop. The pressure of the spring is counteracted by the strike plate until the bolt reaches the plate's well, which, then with nothing counteracting the spring's pressure, allows the bolt to shoot into the well, thus leaving the door closed locked. I think I got that explanation right. Isn't this very exciting for your Saturday video, watching a dodgy cartoon about door locks? So some of the doors in use on British Railways were called double action locks. These had a cam next to the striker plate that holds the door closed if the bolt hasn't fully made it into the well. This safety feature holds the doors shut even if not locked, and came along on the later Mark II and Mark III rolling stocks. The locks are susceptible to bouncing open if slammed too hard, as well as appearing closed from a cursory glance on the outside, where the bolt is not fully seated in the strike plate well. This can lead to doors seemingly opening on their own accord, but we'll come back to this in a little bit. The Tamworth Triangle incidents. So our story begins along this section of track. It's roughly halfway on the West Coast main line between London and Manchester. It is a section of line between Atherstone and Lichfield, with Tamworth in the centre. Intercity as well as other trains work the line up and down to speeds of up to 100 miles an hour in places, along the 4 tracks, which are made up of 2 fast and 2 slow in the up and down direction. Until 1990, not much was thought about this bit of line. True, people had fallen from trains around here before, more than its fair share, but it had been thought that this was due to the middle distance along the route to Manchester, and people by this time reaching Tamworth had been at the bar a few too many times and were nicely tipsy. Thus, any passenger incidents preceding 1990 were often unofficially written off, linked to drunkenness. I should say that during the 1980s, drinking on trains, especially intercity services, had been on a dramatic rise. Often deaths linked to falling from trains were listed as accidental or misadventure by coroners, rather than looking into the doors opening themselves. But just 4 days into 1990, all this would change, when it would be a too hard to ignore pattern. This is the first of the Tamworth Triangle deaths. It kicked off with David Voice. He fell from an intercity train near the village of Hartshill. Being the first of 1990, initially Voice's demise and body discovery was ruled as an accidental death. Nothing more was thought or reported of the accident until the 23rd of August, when boyfriend and girlfriend Adele Jenkins and John Morton fell from a train speeding through Tamworth. Another death would occur just a few days later on the 2nd of September. 2 men were standing near the doors on board an intercity service heading through Lichfield on the down fast. All of a sudden, a door opened as another train passed by, sucking one of the 2 men out to his death. This would be the only incident that had a direct witness. This was the death of Michael Gibbons. Interestingly, the witness said his right hand was in his pocket. This is quite vital, and I think we should have to remember that for later on. The next and final death of the Tamworth Triangle in 1990 was that of Darren Williams on the evening of the 19th of September. He was travelling back to London after a Manchester United football match. The Tamworth Five would be reported in local newspapers and would spark a wider concern around the country on what was the cause. Well, accidental opening of doors by the passengers themselves would be the first point of call for British Rail. But it couldn't explain every incident. Remember Michael Gibbons and his right hand in his pocket? Well, it was reported that after a shooting incident in New York City earlier on in 1990, he had been left with his left arm being disabled, meaning, guess what? He had no physical ability at the time to open the door himself, with his right hand in his pocket and his left hand disabled. This, and the frequency of falling deaths around a roughly 10-mile long length of track, all in under a year, clearly pointed to some sort of issue. The investigation. So British Rail really couldn't ignore the Tamworth deaths, even though I'm sure it would have loved to at the time. The Health and Safety Executive ran a series of independent tests throughout 1991 and 1992, aiming to try and find a definitive answer to why the number of door incidents were going up. Data was analysed for the whole of 1991, and when we look at this graph, incidents of open doors were steadily increasing. This was hinting at a gradual degradation of the door's safety. During the investigation, any incidences of doors apparently opening on its own were fully investigated using the BTP to preserve all evidence. Interestingly, no damage was ever found on the locks or the door frames. Laboratory testing found that required pressure to burst open a door was 10 kilonewtons if the door was fully closed and locked. It was also found that no regular occurrence like a door frame warping, a person hitting the door, or pressure changes via passing trains or tunnels couldn't yield the required burst open pressure. Test trains ran through the Tamworth area to try and find out if that section in particular was door opening inducing, but nothing was found. By re-evaluating the door's design, most notably the double action locks, there was a very worrying thing discovered. You see, if the door was shut but not locked and only being held on the safety cam on the striker, then pressure changes from passing trains or door frame flexing could create a burst open event. They had found the cause. This, in addition to poorly fitted and maintained doors, gave an illusion of a door being shut and locked, but was actually just one shunt passing train or tight curve away from unexpectedly opening. Poor maintenance was blamed for the non-double door action failures, where the door could become wedged in its frame, again appearing shut when not locked. Now, what could be done to prevent this? Well, it wouldn't be cheap. Ideally replacing all rolling stock with automatic doors like what we have today. This was very impractical. Instead, a two-part plan was set out. The first was to paint the inside of the doors. This would be a bright yellow. It would allow guards and platform staff to easily identify any partially open doors. And the second was to install a central locking system, where the doors would be locked automatically once the train was over 9 miles an hour and would unlock when under 5 miles an hour. Thames TV at the time did an expose on the subject. I can't show it here due to the copyright gods, but I'll put a link in the pinned comment. It's definitely worth checking out. The improvements helped reduce door incidents, and the investigation by the HSE exonerated the door locking system being to blame. But it was still an issue with the doors, just more maintenance and user issues, as stated in their report.
It follows that those incidents involving falls from a train for which there is no satisfactory evidential explanation must have been due to doors whose locks were not properly engaged when the train set off, or which were rendered insecure by deliberate action during the course of a journey.
Particularly why the Tamworth Triangle incidents occurred is really unknown, but the use of intercity services at high speeds probably increased the likelihood of a door burst that was being held on its safety cam. The region of the line was the most deadly on British Rail's books, having the highest number of passenger falls, so maybe it was just a case of overwhelming numbers. But even though the doors issues were sort of fixed, railways in the UK would enter one of the bloodiest periods of its history. That is the train crashes of the early privatisation period, of which I've done these videos on the subject. So that's my video on the Tamworth Triangle incident. It's going to be a 3 on my disaster scale, and this is what I've got for my root cause analysis card. Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. This is a Plain Default production. All videos on the channel are Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike licensed. Plain Default videos are produced by me, John, in the currently quite mild corner of southern London, UK. And all I have to say is thank you very much for watching, and Mr. Music, play us out please.